How Autodesk Vaults Connected Workgroups Works. Agenda. I'm going to talk about the data flow, enabling workgroup replication, adding workgroup, replication monitor, manage replication, and install subscriber ADMS. Data flow. Once a subscription has been established and the Vault database has been enabled, users can connect to the Vault server using a Vault client such as the thick or thin client, a CAD add-in, Vault mobile, job processor, etc. They can add data to the subscriber. The files are stored in the server's local file store. But the ADMS will use remote SQL to write the data to the publisher. The log reader agent is watching the transaction log on the publisher for any changes. It detects those changes and writes them to the distribution database. The distribution agent should be continuously looking at the Autodesk replication database. Once the changes are detected, it will copy those changes and apply them to the subscriber. Once the changes are applied to the subscriber, the user will see them. In an attempt to simplify this continuous process, consider this graphic. A client will write data to its Vault server, which in turn will use remote SQL to write that information to the publisher's database. That information is replicated back to the subscriber's database using SQL Transactional Replication. Once that has happened, the client will see the new data. The model is slightly different for users connected directly to the publisher. Their Vault server is connecting to the SQL database locally, so the process for them to see their updates is much simpler. If the connection between the subscriber and the publisher is lost, users connected to the subscriber will no longer be able to write data to their local Vault server. The local SQL database will become read-only. They will be able to log into their Vault server, search, download files, provided they're in the local file store, and do most actions except write any data. Users connected to the publisher will see no impact on their productivity. They will be able to continue as normal. Enable workgroup replication. So how will we go about doing this? The first thing to do is to enable workgroup replication on the ADMS connected to the publisher. This is a single site server. Log into the ADMS console connected to the publisher. Right-click Workgroups, select Enable Workgroup Replication. In the Enable Workgroup Replication dialog box, specify the location of the SQL replication folder and the replication credentials. The replication credentials will be used to write to the SQL shared folder where the initial snapshot is created. It's important that these credentials have both read and write access to the SQL shared folder. When the OK button is clicked, ADMS automates the configuration of SQL using remote SQL. Many things will then happen simultaneously. After clicking OK on that dialog box in the ADMS console, we tell Vault server where the SQL shared folder will be. We also give it the credentials of a Windows domain user account that has both read and write access to it. A snapshot agent is created on the publisher. That snapshot agent then looks at the Knowledge Vault master and writes its schema and entire contents into script files and places them in the SQL shared folder. Those script files could be manually run on any SQL server, and they'd create a copy of the Knowledge Vault master as it is on the publisher. At this point, there's no subscribers. All that's happened is that the single site Vault server has been converted into a publisher with no subscribers. The snapshot agent is also scheduled to regenerate the snapshot every Saturday midnight, or 0000 every Sunday. The distributor was also set up. The distributor placed a log reader agent on the publisher. The log reader's job is to check the publishing database for any changes. It knows what was in the database when the snapshot was generated. If there are any changes in the KVM now, it writes those to the Autodesk replication database so that they are ready to be applied to any subscriber. The log reader is continuously reading the publisher's database, so long as the SQL Server agent is running. Microsoft SQL supports the publisher and distributor being installed on separate SQL machines. However, this is not supported by Vault as it sets up the distributor role on the same machine as the publisher. Vault does not support moving the distributor to another machine later either. Add workgroup. Back in the ADMS console, there are a number of options that are now available when you right-click Workgroup. So let's quickly talk about those. Add Workgroup will allow a new SQL subscriber to be added. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Disable Workgroup Replication. This will tear down all subscribers by removing their database and leaving just their file stores. It will turn a publisher into a single site server. This is the nuclear option to completely removing SQL replication. So it has a number of options that need to be selected before it's executed. Replication properties is where the location of the SQL shared folder can be changed, and if the publisher replication credentials account changes, it can be updated here. Manage replication is where you can choose to replicate a database to a specific subscriber. Because we do not yet have a subscriber, it's not possible to make any changes here at this time. So let's add a subscriber by clicking Add Workgroup. Give the workgroup a name and a label. The labels can be used in numbering schemes to make them unique from one workgroup or subscriber to another. Specify the computer name. This is the NetBIOS name. A NetBIOS name can contain alphanumeric characters and be up to 15 characters. Avoid special characters. Vault now supports non-default names for the SQL instance. The scenario has been set up as close to default as possible, and therefore it's called Autodesk Vault. But it doesn't have to be called that. If the subscriber's SQL credentials are different or non-default, untick the Use Default SQL User ID and Password option and enter the correct details. When adding a workgroup, the remote replication credentials are the credentials used to read the snapshot and run the distribution agent. This is a service account, which must be a Windows network account and have read access to the SQL shared folder. Once you click OK, provided that connectivity is good, the subscriber will now create a subscription under local subscriptions in its instance. It will also create a job under SQL Server Agent Jobs. To see the synchronization status, right-click the subscription and select View Synchronization Status. The subscription status dialog box will show you if there's any problems with the subscription. If you right-click on the job in the SQL Server Agent and select Properties, you can see the agent is the distribution agent. Just to remind you that the distribution agent is talking to the distribution server all the time. If the distribution server learns that there are changes on the publisher's database, those changes are written to the Autodesk replication database first. If there are multiple subscribers, they will all have distribution agents and they will all copy that new information to their subscribers' database. But the most important thing to notice is that there is now a KVM on the subscriber. Vault Server is still not installed on the subscriber, but it can now be installed and we can see what we can do. So here's a review of what's happened so far. When we clicked Add Workgroup and added the necessary information in the ADMS console, we made the publisher aware of a new SQL Server that previously it had no knowledge of. The first thing that happens is that the publisher starts talking to the new subscriber and it tells it to create a distribution agent. The distribution agent looks at the SQL Snapshot folder and starts executing its scripts. The subscriber's distribution agent creates a new database and also creates a continuous subscription. Once the snapshot has been consumed, it switches its attention to the distribution server itself. As was mentioned before, the distribution server will keep a track of all the changes made to the database since the snapshot was created. The distribution agent looks to see if there have been any changes and then consumes them. At the end of this process, the subscriber's database will be an exact copy of the publisher's database. Unlike merge replication, which was used by Vault Server 2021 and earlier, all databases are not bloated by an additional column in every table containing row GUID information. A row GUID was a way to identify each row in each table on each server. This row GUID information could increase the size of the database considerably, but Vault 2022 and later do not do this. Replication Monitor. Replication Monitor is a useful tool that can tell you the status of replications. It's useful for troubleshooting. To access Replication Monitor, right-click Replication, Local Publications, or on an individual publication and select Launch Replication Monitor. After resizing, you can see some useful information. It shows the status of the replication, its name, the performance, latency, and the last time it's synchronized. Right-click the subscription and select View Details. Review the information presented, but also notice the 3 tabs at the top. Cycle through them to see the differences between each tab. Of particular interest is the undistributed commands. Notice the number of commands in the distribution database waiting to be applied to this subscriber. We can also see the estimated time to apply these commands based on past performance. This will show us how long the system thinks it will take before all of the changes on the distributor are synced over. On a subscriber in a production Vault environment, this will be jumping up and down as the number of changes and the data transferred is constantly changing. The replication is not fully set up at this point, so we are not seeing everything that we would in a production environment, and we will cover Replication Monitor in more detail in a later presentation. So more to follow on that. Manage replication. If we right-click on the new subscriber, we have 4 options. Delete workgroup, we'll delete the workgroup and remove the Knowledge Vault Master on the subscriber, and also any other databases. Properties, clicking on properties allows us to change the name and label of the workgroup. The workgroup label can be used to enforce unique file names across multiple workgroups or SQL servers. And we can also change the password of the remote replication user account. Clicking Manage Replication on the subscriber will display a list of databases that are on the publisher but have not yet been replicated to the subscriber. One or more databases can be selected on the left, then by clicking the right button, they are ready to be replicated. When the OK button is clicked, the initial snapshot for each database is generated. Depending on the size of the database and power of the server machine, CPU, RAM, and hard disk speed are all important. The time for the snapshot to be generated can vary. So here's another review of what's just happened when we manage replication. When we clicked OK to replicate multiple databases over to that subscriber, Vault Server sent commands to SQL. Because multiple databases were selected in one go, multiple snapshot agents were created, and they immediately began reading each of the databases marked for replication and generating multiple snapshots that were written to the SQL shared folder in the form of scripts. At the same time, a log reader agent is created for each database on the distributor. Each log reader agent will then scan its database continuously. If any changes now happen, they will be written to the distribution database, ready to be consumed by a subscriber. On the subscriber, a distribution agent is created for each database. That distribution agent will first read the scripts it finds in the SQL shared folder for its database and execute those scripts. The subscribers' databases are created from those scripts and populated with the same schema and data as the original databases on the publisher. Once the snapshot has been fully consumed, the distribution agent will stop reading the snapshot folder and switch its attention to the distribution server for any updates that have occurred since the snapshot was created. Here's a review of what's just happened. On the publisher, Log Reader Agent has been installed for each database that's been published. Snapshot agents have also been created for each publication. Snapshots for each published database have been created. These are now ready to be consumed by any new subscriber. On the new subscriber, a distribution agent has been created for each subscription. These agents will talk to the distribution server continuously. If there are any changes, they will immediately detect them and copy them to the subscriber's database. Install subscribers ADMS. If you have not already, install Vault Server on the subscriber. Users will not be able to access any Vault database until they are enabled. So in the ADMS console, Once it's installed on the subscriber, right-click Vaults and enable each vault. Be aware that enabling a vault before the distribution agent is applied, the snapshot and newer updates will result in an error message. Assuming that the database has been replicated completely over to the subscriber, when you enable the Vault will prompt for the file store location. It will choose the default, or you can choose a custom location for the file store. If the file store does not already exist locally, Vault's file store replication will sync the files based on the file replication settings, which is covered in another presentation.